I want you to try something with me right now. Like wherever you are, whatever you're doing.
Yeah, if you're commuting or, just washing dishes.
Right, exactly. Even if you're just sitting at your desk, I want you to actively participate in a little mental exercise.
Okay.
It's very simple. I want you to recall a basic, completely undisputed geographic fact.
Okay.
So, for example, recall the fact that Paris is the capital of France.
Yeah.
Just, bring that specific piece of information to the very front of your mind.
And just notice what that actually feels like. Or, perhaps more accurately, notice what it doesn't feel like.
Yeah.
Because it's entirely instantaneous.
Right.
It's flat.
Completely flat.
It's purely informational. There's no texture to it. There's no emotional resonance vibrating in your chest. And there is absolutely no sense of time passing.
Right.
The information simply appears, fully formed, almost as if you're, reading text on a sterile white screen inside your head.
It's just there. It does the job. It provides the data and nothing more. But now I want you to do something completely different.
Okay, shifting gears.
Right. I want you to evoke a specific, highly dynamic memory from your own life. So think back, for instance, to a childhood room.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Try to picture the exact way the sunlight hit the walls in the late afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
Can you recall the distinct, resonant timbre of a specific family member's voice calling your name from down the hall?
That's a powerful one.
Or try to remember the smell of the kitchen on a specific holiday morning. Or even...
But when you remember that childhood room, you're experiencing something that possesses order and movement and atmosphere.
It feels alive.
Exactly. You're experiencing the undeniable, heavy feeling that this event belonged to your own life. It doesn't just appear, it comes with a sequence. It unfolds in a dimension of time.
And that massive gap, the sprawling chasm between simply storing a piece of trivia and resurrecting a lived, breathing experience, that is exactly what we're exploring today.
It's a huge topic.
It really is. That gap is our territory. So welcome to this deep dive. Today, our guide through this incredibly complex landscape is a fascinating, deeply layered, and frankly mind-altering essay.
Mind-altering is definitely the right word for it.
For sure. It's titled Memory as Condensed Experience. It's written by Lev Nemotin, PhD, and it comes from his channel and broader theoretical framework known as N5 Digital, Inc., Uncompressed Thinking.
It is a genuinely remarkable piece of work. What this essay attempts to do, really at its core, is give us an entirely new vocabulary for something that usually feels completely ineffable. It bridges the hard biology of the brain with the subjective poetry of what it actually feels like to be a human being remembering the past.
And here is our central mission for this deep dive. We are going to completely dismantle a very familiar, very everyday idea that you almost certainly hold about your own brain.
Oh, absolutely.
We're going to take a conceptual sledgehammer to the idea that, memory stores information in the same way that a video file is stored on a laptop's hard drive.
Right. That metaphor is everywhere.
It's everywhere. And we are going to tear it down. In its place, we are going to construct a radical, incredibly beautiful new mental model. The idea that memory reconstructs experience from structure.
Reconstructs, not retrieves.
Exactly. Now, we are not going to rush this. This is a journey, and the concepts are dense. So we're going to explore this step by step, taking our time to build a completely new vocabulary as we go.
Yeah, and to start dismantling that hard drive metaphor, we actually first need to acknowledge the standard textbook scientific explanation of memory.
Which we kind of have to do, right?
We have to, because the textbook explanation isn't wrong. It is just woefully incomplete in how it translates to our actual lived reality.
Right.
If you walk into a university and ask a neuroscientist how memory works on a cellular level, they will tell you it relies on changes in what are called synaptic weights.
Okay, so that's the classic neurons that fire together, wire together concept, right?
Yep, that's the one.
The idea that cells in the brain build stronger bridges to each other.
Precisely. And decades of incredibly rigorous experimental work have proven this beyond a shadow of a doubt. Think of the famous experiments on sea slugs by Eric Kandel.
Oh, the ones that won the Nobel Prize.
Exactly. When you experience something, the physical connections between your neurons, the synapses, they either strengthen or weaken. Neurons literally alter the probabilities with which they can influence one another. Molecular signaling pathways inside the cells stabilize some of these connection changes by building new proteins, and they actively erase others. So, from a strictly scientific microscopic standpoint, the phrase memory is stored in synaptic weights is a factual, biologically accurate statement.
But let me stop you there, because I think this is where the friction really starts for the average person.
Oh, for sure.
Saying a rich, emotional, multisensory life event, like holding your child for the first time or walking through a snowstorm in a foreign city, is just changes in synaptic weights.
Yeah.
It's technically true, sure,
Yeah.
but it feels entirely hollow.
It doesn't capture it at all.
No, I was thinking about an analogy for this earlier.
Yeah.
It's a bit like saying a breathtaking, sweeping Beethoven symphony is just variations in air pressure,
Oh, that's good.
right? I mean, yes, if you set up a physics instrument in the concert hall, that is literally all a symphony is. It's just invisible air molecules physically bumping into each other and striking your eardrum.
Sure, strictly speaking.
But telling someone a symphony is just air pressure utterly fails to capture the lived texture of the music. It doesn't explain the deep sorrow of the minor chords, or the anticipation of the crescendo, or those physical involuntary chills you get down your spine when the choir comes in.
That is a phenomenal way to look at it because it highlights the limitation of reductionist language. The phrase synaptic weights functions like a highly compressed, deeply technical formula.
Right.
It perfectly describes the local microscopic adjustability of the brain's hardware, but it leaves us completely unsatisfied when we try to intuitively, subjectively understand what a dynamic memory actually is.
Because it's too zoomed in.
Exactly. A physical change in a tiny protein on the branch of a brain cell does not, on its own, help us visualize how the brain can somehow hold onto the speed of a falling ball, or, the gradual approaching sound of a footstep.
Or the sudden overwhelming rush of panic.
Right.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Because if neuroscience has already proven that synapses change, and that this is fundamentally how the biological brain learns, aren't we just arguing about semantics?
Well,
I mean, if the biology is settled and we know the physical mechanism, why does it matter what we call it? Why do we need an entirely new, elaborate framework just to describe what we already know is happening?
Becca.
Isn't synaptic weights enough for the science?
That is a very common critique, actually, and it's in the author specifically addresses. The reason we desperately need a new vocabulary is because the language we use actively shapes the boundaries of our imagination. When we are forced by the scientific community to use phrases like synaptic weights or information storage, our imagination is instantly trapped by the metaphors of the industrial and digital ages.
Oh, I see.
We are trapped into thinking of memory as a static item that is placed in a localized box. We picture a physical filing cabinet. We picture a hard drive with discrete folders.
Yeah, totally guilty of that.
Yeah, we all are. And the danger of that language is that it doesn't give us any conceptual tools to explain time or motion or the generative nature of emotion and memory.
It's too static.
Exactly. The author argues that we need a complementary framework, a bridge between the strict microscopic biology of the neuroscientist and our actual physical intuition of what it feels like to remember. We need a language that can handle both the hard biology and the subjective poetry of memory.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. It's about escaping the whole computer metaphor that we've all been infected by since the 1980s.
That's exactly it.
Which brings us to the most immediate, burning question of this entire deep dive. If memory isn't a static video file being placed on a shelf in a neural filing cabinet, what exactly happens to a lived experience after the present moment passes?
Right, where does it go?
Yeah. If my brain isn't hitting record on a camera, where does the experience go?
To answer that, we have to zoom out and completely rethink what an experience is in the first place. Experience is not a thing. It is a highly dynamic, continuous flow. Yes. Right now, at this exact second, as you are listening to this explanation, your brain is an absolute storm of activity. You have electrical impulses firing, complex chemical signaling cascading across synapses, oscillatory coordination.
Oscillatory coordination.
Yeah, which is basically different populations of neurons firing in rhythmic synchrony, like a massive biological metronome so different brain regions can communicate.
Oh, wow.
Plus, you have input from your eyes, the feeling of gravity on your body, the temperature of the air on your skin. It is a massive, roaring, unimaginably complex river of data. And here is the foundational, humbling concept we have to accept.
Okay.
Almost all of it vanishes instantly.
Well, I mean, it has to, doesn't it?
It does.
If we actually retained every single millisecond of that roaring river, every subtle temperature shift, every shadow on the wall, The feeling of every single thread of clothing against our skin, our minds would be completely paralyzed by the sheer volume of noise.
The metabolic cost alone would destroy us. The overwhelming majority of moment-to-moment detail simply flows through your nervous system and is gone forever. It serves its purpose for immediate survival and navigation, and then it dissipates.
But not all of it.
Right, not all of it.
Yeah.
Under very specific critical conditions, such as when you are paying deep, focused attention, or when an environment is entirely novel, or when there is a massive spike in emotional salience triggered by the amygdala, like intense fear or profound joy, parts of this flowing activity undergo a profound, almost magical transition.
Okay, what kind of transition?
The dynamic experience condenses into structured, physical residues in the brain's biological matter.
I really want to pause and emphasize this concept because this is the absolute core theme of our entire conversation today.
It really is the anchor of the whole theory.
If you take away nothing else, let this sink in. Memory is not stored as a recording. It is condensed and later re-expanded. I'm going to say it again because it takes a minute to overwrite the hard drive metaphor we are all so used to. Memory is not stored as a recording. It is condensed and later re-expanded.
The author's use of the word condensation here is incredibly deliberate. It's brilliant because it captures two distinct truths simultaneously.
How so?
Well, first, it acknowledges that the original event was flowing, extended in time, and deeply dynamic. Second, it acknowledges that what remains afterward is compact, structurally stable, and physically embedded in the tissue of the brain.
So it changes state.
Exactly. The brain doesn't preserve the stream of water as a stream of water. It precipitates a structured physical residue out of that stream.
The essay actually brings up this fascinating analogy of quantum condensation. Now, I want to be careful here. We aren't talking about literal quantum physics operating in the synapses of the brain.
No, of course not.
But conceptually, it is a beautiful parallel. In quantum mechanics, you often have this spread of diffuse, probabilistic potential states. It's a cloud of possibilities.
Right.
But under the right conditions, like an observation or an interaction, that cloud collapses or condenses into a localized, stable, observable reality. A particle takes a definitive position.
It settles into form.
Yeah. The author is suggesting that our lived experience does something conceptually similar. The dynamic, distributed, massive potential of a living moment condenses into a persistent physical form.
And if we look at the philosophical implications of that, it completely dissolves the false opposition we have always held between static memory and dynamic memory.
What do you mean by false opposition?
Well, we tend to fall into this trap of thinking, well, the brain is made of static tissue, so memories must be stored as static, unmoving pictures. But the brain is not a passive, inert archive. It is a highly volatile, living medium.
Right.
The event isn't preserved as a continuous flowing stream of water hidden in a cave somewhere in your head. It precipitates a structured, physical residue, a change in the terrain, that holds the potential to become a stream again when the right conditions are met.
Okay, so to summarize the paradigm shift so far, perception is live, chaotic flow, memory is condensed, physical structure, and recall is the re-expansion of that structure back into flow.
That's a perfect summary.
But this raises an immediate, highly physical question for me. If an event is condensing into biological matter, if this roaring river of data is leaving behind a physical residue, what exactly is the smallest unit of that residue?
Zoom all the way in.
Yeah, if I were to zoom all the way in with a microscope, what is the smallest piece of a memory that is left behind?
This is exactly where the essay transitions from the abstract into the architectural, introducing the first of 4 incredible new terms that will build our new vocabulary.
I'm ready.
The smallest conceptual unit of this condensed experience is what the author calls a memory grain.
A memory grain. I have to say, I love the tactile texture of that word. It sounds like something you could literally hold in your hand.
That tactile feeling is completely intentional. A memory grain is a compact, highly localized basin in neural matter. It is a microscopic microdomain within the brain that carries a single, isolated element of an experience.
So just one piece.
Think of it as a singular atom of a memory. For example, one grain might literally just be the specific velvet redness of a curtain you saw in a theater.
Oh. Another entirely separate grain might be the sudden, sharp jolt of surprise you felt in your chest. Another grain, located somewhere else entirely, might be the specific, nasal tonal pitch of a stranger's laugh.
It's very fragmented.
Highly fragmented.
Okay.
A grain is not a whole memory. It's not a scene. It is a fragmented, condensed piece of reality.
Just to keep us grounded in the actual biology for a second, these grains aren't just metaphors, right? They correspond to real physical changes in the meat of the brain.
Oh, absolutely. They are biological realities.
Right, so we're talking about altered receptor densities at specific synapses, or the active insertion of new proteins into cell membranes to make them more sensitive, or
Yes.
even changes in the actual physical shape of dendritic spines, those tiny little mushroom-shaped branches that stick out of your neurons to catch signals.
That's the hardware of it.
But the essay makes a really crucial point here that I want to highlight. We shouldn't just obsess over the molecular biology of the proteins. To understand memory, we need to focus on the behavior of the grain. Exactly. Staring at the protein doesn't tell you what it does. Physics actually offers a phenomenal analogy here to explain the behavior of a grain. The concept of an energy minimum, or a state that is metastable.
Okay. Metastable. That's a term that gets thrown around a lot in physics. But what does it actually mean in the context of a brain?
Think of a complicated, rolling landscape with lots of hills, steep slopes, and shallow valleys.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Now imagine a ball rolling across it. The system, which represents the billions of possible configurations of your brain's electrical activity, has millions of possible states. Most of these states are highly unstable.
Because the ball is on a slope.
Right, the ball's on a slope and it keeps rolling. That represents the chaotic flow of normal perception. But a highly intense experience, backed by attention and emotion, essentially pushes a small part of that neural landscape into a valley, a basin of relative stability.
It carves out a little dimple in the hill.
Exactly. Once the biological tissue settles into that dimple, that basin, it tends to stay there. It requires a significant jolt of new energy to push the ball back out.
So it's like a coin balanced perfectly on its edge. It is stable for the moment, but it's not permanently locked in place like it's glued to the table.
That's a great way to put it.
It has the potential to move again.
Yeah.
But right now, it's resting.
That is a perfect description of metastability. It's not permanently frozen like a block of ice, but it's no longer pure chaotic flow either. The biological tissue has settled into a specific, altered configuration. It is a grain.
I understand the mechanics of the grain, but
Yeah.
here is where my brain starts to genuinely rebel against this framework.
Oh, how come?
Because if I have a grain over here in my visual cortex that solely represents the redness of the curtain, and another grain way over there with my auditory cortex for the sound of my mom's voice,
Yeah.
and another grain somewhere deep in my olfactory bulb for the smell of the kitchen, my memory simply isn't a disjointed pile of sensory confetti.
Sensory confetti, I like that.
Right. When I remember that afternoon in my childhood, I don't experience isolated, chaotic fragments firing randomly. I remember standing in the kitchen while she spoke, while looking at the curtain.
It feels unified.
It feels entirely unified. How do these completely scattered, microscopic, geographically distant grains in the brain somehow become a single, cohesive event?
You've just hit on one of the most famous puzzles in all of neuroscience. It's often called the binding problem.
The binding problem.
Experience is never made of isolated fragments, so how does the brain bind them? This is where the magic of the brain's macroarchitecture comes in, and it leads us directly to our second vocabulary term.
Right, lay it on me.
To solve the problem of sensory confetti, the brain creates what the author calls a memory weave.
Memory weave.
Yes. A weave is a distributed, complex configuration of grains across multiple, disparate regions of the brain. It is the physical manifestation of the binding process.
So it connects them.
Exactly. Your visual areas in the back of your head are holding the shapes and colors. Your auditory areas on the sides are holding the sounds. Your limbic system, deep in the center, is holding the emotional terror or joy.
And my gut feeling.
Your somatosensory cortex at the top is holding the physical feeling of tension in your gut. What happens is that deeper structures, specifically the hippocampus, act as a massive high-speed coordinator.
Wait, let me make sure I'm visualizing this correctly. Is the hippocampus acting like a container that gathers all the grains together into one spot?
No, and that is a crucial distinction. The hippocampus does not suck all the information into itself to store it.
Okay, so what does it do?
Think of it more like an orchestra conductor.
Oh, I see.
The violins are in one part of the room, the brass in another, the percussion in the back. The conductor doesn't play the instruments, right? The conductor sends rhythmic signals, often via those oscillatory coordinations we mentioned earlier, that force the violins or the visual cortex.
And the brass, the auditory cortex.
Exactly, to fire in precise synchrony. By forcing these geographically dispersed grains to activate together in a specific rhythmic pattern, the hippocampus binds them into a coherent, event-like fabric.
The word weave is doing an incredible amount of heavy lifting in this metaphor, and I absolutely love it. Because a weave is not just a pile.
Right, it's structured.
If you have a pile of different colored threads sitting on a table, that's just a mess. A weave is an interlacing. It is a highly specific structure where the individual elements only gain their full meaning through their relationships to one another.
Beautifully said.
Like a red thread by itself is just red. But woven next to a blue thread and a gold thread, it becomes part of a recognizable pattern.
That is a profound observation, and it cuts to the heart of what autobiographical memory actually is. In a memory weave, a face isn't just a generic arrangement of eyes and a nose anymore.
It's specific.
Right. Through the binding of the weave, it becomes that specific face in that specific dimly lit room, accompanied by that specific comforting tone of voice, causing that specific feeling of safety in your chest.
It's all tied together.
The physical existence of the memory is distributed all over the entire geography of your brain, but the weave is the invisible pattern of coordinated readiness that permanently links them all together.
Okay, so let me trace the path so far. Perception is a chaotic flow. It condenses into highly localized, metastable states called grains.
Yep.
And those distant grains are bound together by the hippocampus into a highly distributed, synchronized weave. We now have a beautifully woven tapestry of a scene.
Oh, they do.
But hold on, this still doesn't quite match reality. Because autobiographical memories aren't static tapestries. They aren't paintings hanging silently on a museum wall.
They move.
They move. When I remember a conversation with my boss yesterday, it has a distinct beginning, a middle, and an end. The door opens, and he walks in, then he sits down, then he speaks.
Sequence.
If a weave is just a static pattern of connected grains, how does this static biological tissue unfold over time? How does it generate a sequence?
This specific question might be the most challenging, counterintuitive, and ultimately beautiful concept in the entire essay.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
To explain sequence, speed, and that undeniable feeling of causality, the feeling that this specific thing happened because that specific thing happened first, the author introduces the third critical term,
Which is?
memory currents.
Memory currents. That immediately brings us back to the water imagery.
Exactly. A current is a preserved structural bias in how electrical activation tends to flow through a weave. It is absolutely vital to understand here that the brain is not storing a mini-movie reel.
So no film strip in the brain.
No film strip. It isn't recording time as a literal sequence of photographic frames. Time is not a dimension that is stored in tissue. Instead, the brain is creating pathways of least resistance.
Pathways of least resistance, okay.
The physical circuits, the long axons connecting brain regions, the synapses themselves, they develop subtle asymmetries and precise timing delays. They structurally favor particular sequences of firing over others.
The essay uses this incredible vivid analogy of a river network, and I think we need to spend some time here to really unpack it.
It's a great analogy.
Think about a powerful river winding through a valley. The water itself represents the live neural activity, the conscious flow of the present moment. Now imagine a severe drought. The water dries up completely.
The flow is gone.
The water is gone. The water is not stored in the dirt, but the shape of the terrain, the deeply carved out riverbeds, the steep eroded banks, the gentle winding slopes, that terrain remains permanently altered by the water that once flowed there.
It leaves a trace.
That carved terrain is the memory current. It is a highly structured bias in the environment. So years later, when it rains and the neural activity returns, it doesn't just flow randomly across a flat plain.
It follows the carved path.
Right. It is immediately forced to flow down the exact same trajectories. The shape of the ground makes certain movements incredibly likely, almost inevitable.
That is precisely how it works. The sequence isn't a substance moving in a special time channel. It is a structured bias in the propagation of neural activity. The water simply follows the path that has been carved for it.
I also like to think of it like setting up a massive, impossibly intricate line of dominoes across a gymnasium floor.
Oh, I like that.
When you experience an event, your brain isn't setting up a video camera to record the dominoes falling. That would be the old hard drive metaphor.
Right.
Instead, your brain is meticulously, painstakingly setting up the physical dominoes themselves in a highly specific, complex branching pattern. So that years later, when you tip the very first domino over, the exact same cascading, sequential motion happens all over again.
The motion is recreated.
The motion itself isn't stored anywhere. The precise arrangement of the matter that creates the motion is what is stored.
That captures the mechanics of it perfectly. A cinematic, moving memory is ultimately just a biological recipe for unfolding. The current dictates the sequence of the weave.
That makes so much sense.
But to truly understand human identity, we have to expand our scope even further. We have to zoom all the way out. Because human memory isn't just a bag of isolated domino setups or a collection of disconnected, dried-up riverbeds.
It's all connected.
Every single event you experience is intimately connected to countless others. And this brings us to the final macrostructural term in the framework, the memory lattice.
The lattice. So we've gone from the microscopic grain to the regional weave to the flowing current and now to the lattice. This is where we look at the entire architecture of a human life.
Right. A memory of a childhood hallway isn't just a weave of a hallway floating in a void. Because of how the brain naturally organizes information, that hallway is inevitably physically linked to other weaves.
Like what?
Well, it is linked to a specific elementary school, to a specific age you were at the time, to a complex family dynamic, and even to a general overarching mood of that entire era in your life.
It's a web.
The memory lattice spans across multiple brain regions and encompasses massive timescales, bridging years and decades. It connects episodes spatially, emotionally, causally, and narratively. It is the constantly evolving, overarching structure of your entire identity.
I want to ground this in a really specific, universal human experience, because this explains something that feels deeply mysterious when it happens to us.
What's that?
Well, we've all had this exact scenario occur. You are going about your day, and something triggers you to recall one very specific, isolated event. Say, you remember sitting in a specific neon-lit diner at 2 a.m. in your mid-20s.
You've all been there.
Right. You pull up that one weave, but suddenly, almost violently, it summons this massive neighboring structure in your mental life space.
A whole network lights up.
Yes. You don't just remember the diner. You suddenly remember the specific indie rock music you were listening to that whole year. You remember the exact smell of the car you drove. You remember the person you were intensely dating. And you feel a visceral echo of the deep anxiety you felt about your fledgling career back then. It all comes rushing back in a massive wave.
And the reason it comes rushing back isn't because you consciously typed a query into a search bar for files from the year 2015.
Right.
It happens automatically because of the physical reality of the lattice. Your brain organizes memory through overlapping, highly relational systems. These events literally share biological components. They share the same grains, and they overlap in their weaves.
Oh, because the diner grain might be physically connected to the anxiety grain.
Exactly. They share a specific emotional tone anchored in the amygdala. The lattice is what makes a human life navigable from the inside. It is a multi-scale topography.
So it's layers upon layers.
A single grain of a neon light belongs to a weave of a diner. That weave of a diner belongs to a broad region of your life history defined by your 20s. And all those regions are linked by enduring structures of how you view yourself.
Okay, we have successfully built the entire massive architecture, the new model now. We have grains, which are the highly localized microscopic fragments of an experience.
Yes.
We have weaves, which are the coordinated brain-wide networks that bind the grains into a unified scene. We have currents, which structurally bias the flow of activity to create sequence, time, and motion.
That's right.
And we have the lattice, which networks thousands of weaves together into a continuous, coherent identity. But this brings us to the ultimate functional question. The so what?
The application of it all.
How do we actually use this structure in our daily lives? When I sit here right now and try to remember what I ate for lunch yesterday, what is physically happening in that exact moment?
This is where we reach a radical paradigm-shifting change in how we must talk about the act of remembering. If you accept the architecture of grains, weaves, and currents, you have to completely banish the word retrieve from your vocabulary.
Banish it completely.
You do not retrieve a memory. You do not walk into the dark stacks of a mental library, find a dusty book on a shelf, and pull it out to read it. What your brain is actually doing is a process of re-expansion.
Re-expansion. I want to restate our core idea here one more time because it just clicked for me in a massive, undeniable way.
Oh, for it.
The mind does not retrieve a stored event. It makes the event partially happen again in real time based on condensed constraints.
Yeah.
Memory is not stored as a recording. It is condensed and later re-expanded.
Here's exactly how that magic trick of the mind works in practice. You encounter a cue in your environment. It could be anything. The sharp smell of pine needles, 3 notes of an old pop song playing in a grocery store, or glancing at a faded photograph.
Any little spark.
Right. That tiny cue activates just a minuscule fraction of a dormant weave, maybe just 1 or 2 grains. But because of the structural coupling we talked about, that partial activation doesn't stay isolated. It begins to spread.
It cascades.
The memory currents grab that initial spark of activation and ruthlessly guide its flow, forcing the electrical activity down the paths of least resistance that were carved years ago. Distributed regions of your brain begin to synchronize and coordinate in real time.
Rebuilding the whole thing.
Your visual system starts frantically throwing up imagery fragments. Your auditory system reconstructs sound qualities based on the constraints. Your body might even physically reinstate the muscle tension, the elevated heart rate, or the sudden warmth of the original moment.
It's crystallizing outward from a single activated fragment. It is an intensely generative process. It's almost like modern AI image generation, but happening biologically in milliseconds.
That's a really modern way to think about it, yeah.
But here is where it gets really interesting and honestly a little bit unsettling. We all walk around with this profound illusion of full detail.
Oh, the illusion is so strong.
When I remember my 10th birthday party, I genuinely feel like I am remembering the entire room perfectly. I can see the cheap plastic tablecloth, the faces of my friends, the specific way the candles illuminated the cake. But this framework suggests that the brain is actually highly, ruthlessly sparse.
Incredibly sparse. This is one of the hardest things for people to accept about their own minds. The brain simply does not store every visual pixel of a room or every sound wave of a conversation. It cannot afford to.
It just doesn't have the capacity.
Instead, it stores key anchors, the absolute peaks of the experience, the most emotionally salient features that mattered for your survival or your identity.
Okay, but what about the rest of the scene? The background wallpaper, the exact words spoken, the peripheral details.
Your brain is dynamically generating them on the fly in real time, using general semantic knowledge about what living rooms, birthday parties, and human faces typically look like. It uses a handful of biological anchors to brilliantly constrain a massive real-time hallucination.
Hold on. If my brain is just dynamically generating half the scene, or let's be honest, probably way more than half the scene based on just a few biological anchors, doesn't that mean my most cherished foundational memories are basically fiction?
Wow.
My memory of my first love or my biggest triumph is just a generative reconstruction controlled by a few scattered facts. How can I trust anything I remember? Are you telling me my entire past is just a highly convincing illusion?
That is the existential terror of studying memory, and it's a profoundly important question. It is why neuroscientists refer to memory as living soft matter. Is it an illusion? No.
It's not.
It is highly convincing because the physical traces, the actual anchors, the grains that survived condensation are real. They are physical, undeniable changes in the tissue of your brain. Something real happened to carve those paths.
Okay.
But it is inherently fallible because the expansive reconstructive process leaves immense room for gaps, for blending different events together, and for outright corruption.
So it is a flaw. Our biological hard drives are just faulty and prone to data corruption.
No, and that is the critical shift in perspective you have to make. This vulnerability, this malleability, is not a biological design flaw. It is the exact necessary price of plasticity.
Plasticity.
Think about a glassy system in physics, or any form of soft matter like clay. It holds its shape firmly enough to be useful, but it can be remolded with pressure.
Right, because if it was perfectly rigid,
If your memory were perfectly rigid, if it were literally a read-only video file burned onto a disk, you could never, ever update your understanding of an event based on new wisdom. You could never learn from your mistakes.
oh, I see.
And perhaps most importantly, you could never heal from trauma. If a traumatic memory were an immutable, unchangeable object, you would be forced to experience the exact same level of debilitating terror every single time you recalled it for the rest of your life.
Wow.
You know?
So the very fact that memory is soft, the fact that it is a generative reconstruction rather than a playback, is the exact mechanism that allows us to process our past and actually grow as human beings.
Exactly. This leads us to a concept in neuroscience called reconsolidation, and it is truly one of the wildest things the brain does.
What's reconsolidation?
The very act of remembering a memory physically alters it. When you re-expand a weave by thinking about a past event, you are actively pulling those neural circuits out of their stable resting basin. You are making them labile, which means they become malleable, unstable, and capable of being rewritten.
Oh, so just by thinking about it, I'm unlocking it.
In that highly active labile state, the memory network can be contaminated by your current mood, by new knowledge you've acquired since the event, or by the specific context of why you are remembering it today. When you stop thinking about it and the memory settles back down when it condenses again, it is structurally slightly different than it was before you recalled it.
You disturb the sediment at the bottom of the lake, and when it finally settles back down, the particles have arranged themselves in a slightly different pattern.
That's a beautiful way to picture it.
That is a beautiful, terrifying thought. I remember reading about those famous studies by Elizabeth Loftus, where simply changing the phrasing of a question asking how fast cars were going when they smashed versus when they hit literally rewrote the witness's visual memory of the accident.
Yes, classic examples of reconsolidation.
It perfectly illustrates this idea of soft matter, which leads us perfectly into the grand synthesis of all of this.
Yeah.
If memory is this living, generative, physically grounded, but constantly changing structure, what exactly is an experience once it is over?
Right.
Dr. Nemoten's essay coins a brilliant, almost sci-fi term to encapsulate this: event matter.
Event matter. It is a profound philosophical concept that bridges the subjective feeling of holding a memory with the harsh biological reality of the brain. An event originally existed as a dynamic, flowing process in real time. It was an action.
But it persists.
It persists in your head as a material organization. The event physically becomes matter. It becomes matter-like. It is not a solid object you can extract with tweezers, but it is a physical reconfiguration of tissue that possesses the latent power to generate inner motion.
It is the stored potential for renewed life.
Yeah.
And accepting this framework fundamentally changes how we have to view our own personal identity.
It really does.
If autobiographical memory is a sprawling lattice of event weaves, constantly re-expanding and recondensing, then the self, the me that is talking to you right now and the you that is listening, is not a static observer sitting in a dark theater inside your skull watching a screen holding a box of memory files.
No, the homunculus does not exist. The self is the emergent, continuously shaped pattern of the lattice itself.
It is the lattice.
You remain yourself over the decades, not because you have some fixed, indestructible essence buried deep inside your cortex, but because your highly specific lattice of condensed events continues to cohere, interact, and reactivate in a continuous, albeit evolving way. The self is quite literally built out of how your memory organizes the past.
I want to take a quick detour here because this insight has massive, urgent implications for something we talk about constantly these days: artificial intelligence and the concept of artificial memory.
Oh, absolutely. The comparison is staggering.
When we look at a computer, or even a highly advanced large language model, they are fundamentally, inescapably storage-based systems. They take a piece of data, they assign it to an explicit physical location on a silicon drive, they index it with an address, and when queried, they fetch it exactly as it was written.
Which is the exact polar opposite of what we have been describing for the last hour. Even the most advanced neural networks today do not remember the way biological systems do.
They just retrieve.
Artificial systems fundamentally lack embodiment. They lack self-relevance. They do not have an amygdala dropping a chemical tag of terror or transcendent joy onto a data point. And they certainly do not perform this distributed, biologically generative reenactment governed by currents and weaves.
Right. And AI doesn't have a physical body that violently tightens up when a specific file is accessed.
Yeah.
It doesn't sweat. It doesn't reconstruct the data through a lens of its current emotional state.
Not at all.
If we ever want to achieve true artificial equivalence to human memory, if we ever want machines that actually remember like we do, we cannot just keep building bigger, faster hard drives. We would need to engineer an entirely new paradigm of architecture.
A completely different approach.
We would need a system that actually condenses experience into dynamically reactivatable forms, forms that are inextricably physically tied to an ongoing model of a self. It would have to reconstruct the past through the filter of its present state, not just mindlessly fetch a static string of code.
It really highlights just how profoundly organic, vulnerable, and beautifully alive our own memories are. They are not dead archives. They are a reconstructive field of latent event structures.
Which brings us to the summit of this incredible deep dive. We've traversed the microscopic grains, the binding weaves, the flowing currents, and the macro lattice. But what does this entirely new mental landscape mean for you, the listener?
The big takeaway.
Why should you care that your memory is a reconstructive living lattice rather than a faulty mechanical hard drive?
It matters deeply because it completely reframes your emotional relationship with your own mind. When you truly internalize the reality that you are not retrieving pristine, unchangeable files, you can finally stop judging yourself so harshly for having a bad memory.
Yes. It grants you so much grace. When you inevitably forget a granular detail of an important conversation, or when you and a sibling are arguing because you remember a foundational childhood event completely differently, it is not because one of your hard drives is corrupted or broken.
No, not at all.
It is because you are both pulling up a highly sparse set of biological anchors, and you are using your current, wildly different adult brains with all their different biases and emotional states to dynamically generate the rest of the scene in real time.
You're running different generative models.
Understanding the mechanics of condensation and re-expansion gives you an incredible appreciation for the raw, creative power of your own mind. It validates that inexplicable feeling we all have that our memories feel alive because biologically, structurally, they literally are. They are the physical, stored potential for renewed life.
To deliver the ultimate culmination of Dr. Nemotin's framework, we can summarize it in one profound realization. The brain does not keep the past. The past is not a physical place where events remain intact, waiting to be visited. Instead, the brain builds structures that allow the past to move again.
The brain does not keep the past. It builds structures that allow the past to move again. That is a sentence I'm going to be unpacking and thinking about for a very, very long time. It changes everything about how I view my own history.
It's a paradigm shift for sure.
And as we finally wrap up this deep dive into uncompressed thinking, I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to mull over on your own as you go about the rest of your day.
Let's hear it.
We have clearly established the science. Every single time you recall a memory, you are not fetching it. You are actively re-expanding it, reconstructing it from sparse anchors using the living soft matter of your brain today. You are disturbing the sediment, making it labile, and allowing it to change before it settles again.
Right.
So, if the act of remembering actively filters the past through the person you are right now, to what extent is the past you remember actually just a reflection of the person you've become today? If recalling a memory physically and inevitably changes it, does that mean the only truly unchanged, authentic past you have is the one you never think about?